So this is the first supplementary information video I've done. This is part of the reason why we did the Rose Anvil 2 channels, so we can go really in depth into like everything you need to know about Moc Toe boots. So that in those Mocktober videos, I don't have to rehash the same information over and over and only give you a small chunk of the full information you need. With this, you should be able to just, if you're watching a Moc Toe video, be like, oh wait, forgot about Moc Toes, whatever. Click on that video, now you're watching this, and you have a full breakdown of everything you need to know. So you don't have to like piece it together across several different videos, because I only hit on it lightly when we don't have a full length video to go through it. Plus, it allows me to ramble like I'm doing in this intro. So if you like this style of video, let me know. Support this video, like it, comment, share it, all the other stuff, because the way that I base what I want to do on this channel is off of what I want to do, but also which videos are performing well. So if you like the style, support it. Otherwise, we'll probably stop doing it. So let me know what other topics you want me to cover in this style of video. And thanks to Devia for sponsoring this video. They make a mighty fine looking Moc Toe themselves called the Nomad. And the Nomad comes in this really nice olive green. It comes in a nice black color. It also comes in this reddish kind of rust color they call cognac. They retail for $180. They're a wax suede. They're veg tan leather welt. It's a 360 Goodyear welt. It's leather lined. It has a leather insole, a natural cork footbed, and oil and slip resistant outsole. It's a nice foam wedge sole. And they design their boots to be lightweight, flexible, comfortable while maintaining the traditional build. But the other thing is they're not quite as bulbous as a lot of these other Moc Toes. They're more of a dressier style. And they say that they're 100% hand built, and that allows them to control the production quantities to ensure that they're making the best quality product possible, to keep those quality controls up to the highest standards, while still making enough boots to get that economy of scale, to bring that price down to that $180 price point. But that also means that they're fairly limited edition, and they don't always have everything in stock. So if you see one that you like, get it, because it takes a while for them to get a new batch done. And they also have a women's line releasing this week, and a men's Crazy Horse collection dropping towards the end of October. So check them out via the link in my description. And thanks to Devia for sponsoring this video, taking a gamble on this video on the second channel. So I appreciate them for being willing to sponsor this and showing a little faith in the channel too. So support them by checking out their boots below. And thanks again to Devia. So what is a Moc Toe boot? Well, the name, it's pretty obvious. Maybe some of you didn't know, but it comes from the name moccasin, because Moc Toe on a moccasin has the exact same shape and look as a Moc Toe boot. And obviously moccasins have been around for hundreds of years for the Native Americans. And it's hard to really trace the lineage of where the Moc Toe design came from. But according to Thorogood, their most popular boot is a Moc Toe, they say this style was inspired by the design of moccasin shoes historically worn by Native American peoples, and Moc Toe simply means moccasin toe. And another article I read while researching a little bit for this video is they said the earliest example of a Moc Toe dates all the way back to 1500 BCE. So it kind of seems like it's one of these things where humans across time, throughout all different parts of the world, eventually they get to a point where they want to cover their feet with something more durable. And one of the easiest ways to do it is by creating a moccasin, or that mock style construction. And so it's this really interesting thing where a Moc Toe is almost a part of human history, because it independently evolved, like footwear independently evolves to a Moc Toe almost before any other style of footwear. And so just doing this video kind of gave me a new appreciation for the Moc Toe style, because it can trace its lineage all the way back to the very first boots, where they literally take a piece of leather, curl it up around your foot, and sew it together. Technically a Moc Toe. So I thought that was kind of cool. And as for these more modern Moc Toes that you see, like these heritage style boots, like the Red Wings and everything, and these Devias, it's hard to know exactly where they came from, but I think a lot of these boots trace their lineage back to the early 1900s, when, the Industrial Revolution, people started working factories, doing like steel work, and they needed a boot. And during that time, Moc Toe boots became very popular, especially with the steel workers with the wedge sole that gripped onto the steel better, allegedly. And so all of these Moc Toe boots kind of trace their lineage back to the early 1900s. From then backwards, who knows? They've been making Moc Toe boots with dress shoes and moccasins for centuries. So it's really hard to trace it, but there's your brief history, even though it's not a complete history. So what are the advantages of a Moc Toe? Why would someone consider a Moc Toe over a regular plain toe boot or a cap toe boot? Well, the biggest advantage is it gives you more wiggle room. It gives you a lot bigger and more spacious toe box because it allows you to build up this sidewall pretty high. Obviously these Devials are not super high, but like look at the red wings, you know, it allows you to build that up really high. And it also allows you to choose how wide you want the boot to be, because you can basically expand this as much as you want and keep this as tall as you want without having to worry about the leather stretching around a really big last and cracking and splitting in certain spots. Does every boot that's a Moc Toe mean you get more wiggle room? Not necessarily, because you know these Devials are not the slimmest toes, but they're also not nearly as roomy as some of these other boots that are made to be roomy. So that's the main advantage of a Moc Toe, but the other advantage is that it just looks nice. You know, the main reason people buy Moc Toes is just for the look and the style. You know, if you're working construction and you want a wider toe box, it makes sense, but for the most people that are buying boots for casual wear, it's all about the style. And so when it really comes down to it, there's not a whole lot of advantages to a Moc Toe boot other than the spacious toe box. But as for disadvantages, this extra bit of stitching around the toe just lends itself to another fell point that it doesn't necessarily have to have if you're building a shoe strictly on durability compared to a regular boot like, I don't know, let's pick up 1000 Mile. There's no stitching on the toe. So you're not gonna have a fail spot at the toe where stitching is on a Moc Toe. Another disadvantage is that it just doesn't crease as easily at first. You know, there's a lot of articles out there saying it creases easier, and I think it's one of these things where someone said it once and then just gets perpetuated in all these like articles that are clearly just rehashed versions of the same article to try to get people to click onto the site for the sidebar ads, that whole game. And so they're not really more flexible. I don't know where that idea came from, because that little rib on top gives you an extra structure that an unstructured and just a regular toe box wouldn't have. And you know, especially when you get some of these work boots like the Carolinas and Thorogoods, they have a hard rib on there that takes a while to break in. It's not nearly as flexible. So that's a disadvantage to some people. And with a Moc Toe, depending on how it's built, which we'll go over in a second, it also can grab a lot more dirt and grime and really wear out the toe of the boot sooner. But that one's not maybe as much of a disadvantage. So there's your pros and cons, but ultimately when it comes down to it, it's all about the style for 99% of people. Moc Toes look cool. It is what it is. So now, what are the different types of Moc Toes? Let me get some of this cleared up. There's 3 types of Moc Toes, and then there's a 4th that's like a true Moc Toe, but it's more about the construction than it is about the toe itself. That's the first one we're gonna talk about, is the true moccasin construction, because this is something that a lot of people don't fully understand when it comes to Moc Toe, is what a true moccasin is. And there's a few brands out there still making them this way, just not as many as there used to be, because it's a very labor intensive process. And so first, let's talk about that traditional Moc Toe, because it is the most traditional way to do it. It's how moccasins have been made. It's been around since mankind's been around. And then we'll talk about the 3 different types of toe stitching that can be on this type of Moc Toe or any other type of construction after that. So the true Moc Toe is like by far the most unique and the most rare style of construction for a Moc Toe boot, because it's the traditional way to do it, which is all handmade. And so the way that they do this is they take a sheet of leather and they last it around a shoe last, which is just like every other boot, but instead of lasting it from the top down to the sole, they last it from the sole all the way up. And so obviously you're not going to be able to get leather to conform perfectly around the entire shape of the boot. And so just like this little moccasin I used to have as a house slipper, they usually stop at the sidewall because it's hard to get leather to, it's easy to get leather to stretch around a last. It's harder to get it to compress around a last. And so you can see here, there's that band of leather that goes all the way underneath your foot and all the way up to the sidewall. And then this top piece is an independent U-shaped piece that is sewn in that moccasin style construction to that bottom piece that wraps all the way underneath your foot. And the benefit of this is that you have a full layer of leather right underneath your foot, and you don't have like cork underneath it, you don't have like several layers of leather, you don't have the unevenness of an upper being tucked underneath and trying to compensate for the height underneath your foot. It's just about as natural underneath the foot as possible in a boot or shoe. And that has its disadvantages as well, because you don't have quite as much protection from the ground unless you're really building the boot up, but it also allows you to feel more of what's underneath the ground. So for hunting, some people like to hunt in Moc Toes as a true moccasin because they can feel exactly where they're stepping. They're not just clomping around in really stiff boots. It allows you to sneak up on an animal easier. And maybe you're channeling a little bit of that moccasin hunting ability. And they're also pretty easy to repair because this style of construction is pretty robust, that like if you actually wear out the Moc Toe, you don't have to replace much other than that top piece of leather. Even if that Moc Toe stitch gets blown out, you can just drop that Moc Toe stitch lower, clean it up, and you got basically a brand new pair of boots. But I just wanted to go over a true moccasin construction just so you're aware. So first, the one-piece Moc Toe. If we look at our example in the Carolinas or the Thorogoods, so this is a Moc Toe because you can see the stitching, you see that rib there. But the difference is this vamp is a single piece of leather, just like a regular plain toe boot. But this Moc Toe stitch is sewn on at some point to give it that decorative Moc Toe look. And a lot of times with this one-piece style of construction, you're not really getting that much more wiggle room for your toes because they're usually built on the exact same lasts as the regular plain toe boots. They just throw a Moc Toe stitch on there for the looks. So that's the first style, and it's usually on more affordable footwear, but it doesn't mean it's always on affordable footwear. You know, Nick's has a one-piece Moc Toe versus, you know, Carolina's like a $200 boot that also has a one-piece Moc Toe. Even down to like Brunts, some of the worst boots we've cut apart in the channel that I have a hard time with, they even have a one-piece Moc Toe. So it's not always an indicator of quality, but sometimes. And this Moc Toe stitch on the one piece can be puckered like this. It can have a hard rib underneath of there. It can be flat like on the Alden Indies. And like I said, it can be put on any style of construction. It can be on a, well actually it can't be on a true moccasin construction because it's a single piece of leather starting from the bottom, working its way up. So the single piece mock is the only one that can't be on a true moccasin, but it can be on stitch down, it can be on Goodyear welt, it can be on every style of construction, if you have the right equipment. Pros of it are that it's a really simple construction style. It can be done all by machines. You don't have to hand sew anything. It's a little more water resistant than the next few types because you can have a waterproof lining or any kind of lining on the inside that's not sewn to that Moc Toe. And those holes poked in there, you only have holes rather than the next one that has two pieces put together. Disadvantages are it could wear out quicker because you're basically having a regular toe boot, but with extra stitches in it. And they're not as easy to repair. If you do blow out that Moc Toe stitch, you don't have an extra piece of leather at the toe that you can pop on there and sew back together. Then if we move to the two-piece construction, which is by far the most common in a higher quality boot because it has that traditional look, and it just, a lot of times you can build up that sidewall more and a little bit easier than a single piece. Well, this is like what we talked about in the true moccasin construction, where the sidewalls come up and then a top piece that's a U-shape is sewn to those sidewalls. But unlike the traditional mock, the sidewalls stop where the sole begins, whether it's a Goodyear welt, stitch down, all the other versions. Disadvantages of a two-piece construction is, like I said, you've got two pieces butted together, and a lot of times they're glued as well, but over time these can split, and it can make the boot look a little extra worn and not quite as finished as a single piece. It also allows some dirt and debris to build up on where those two pieces come together, and over time it can separate. And if you do pop a stitch, your boot can come undone. Like if you pop a stitch on a single piece Moc Toe, your boot's not coming undone. But with this, if it comes undone, you're gonna have a flap here and some dirt can get in. You're still gonna have the lining protecting your foot, but it's not quite as, like if it's more catastrophic if you pop a stitch on a two-piece than it is on a one-piece. But the advantage is exactly like I said, where you've got a taller toe box, you can have a wider toe box. There's a lot more room for adjustment and width and height. And so it's usually, if you're going for a Moc Toe with a wider toe box, it's usually a two-piece. Then if we move to the three-piece construction, it's essentially the exact same thing as a two-piece, but with an extra strip of leather. So just like the two-piece, you got those sidewalls that come up. You've got that top piece that's a U-shape that is sewn on in that Moc Toe construction. But before those two pieces are sewn together, a lot of times you're gonna have either an extra U piece that wraps over top, like this one, where you can see there's a U piece underneath, just like the Red Wings. But you also have an extra top layer that's rolled over top of that rib right there and then sewn through. So you're really sewing through the sidewall, the U piece underneath, and the U piece on top. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 layers, I think you're sewing through, instead of the 2 layers in the 2-piece because of the way this is rolled over top. The advantage of this is that you're kind of combining the best attributes of the 1 and the 2-piece mock toe construction, where you've got the ability to have the height and the wideness and like the traditional aspect of where you can have it truly built on a true moccasin construction. But you also have the protection of the 1-piece mock toe, where it's going to be a little more waterproof and water resistant because you have that rolled edge without the seams. With all the extra layers, it makes it a little bit more durable, and I would say probably the most durable out of the 3 different types. And maybe the most important thing about a 3-piece construction, and this also goes for the 2-piece, but mostly seen in the 3-piece, is that they're usually hand sewn. Because you could still hand sew a 2-piece pretty easily, but a lot of machines can sew a 2-piece together. And so most brands default to doing it with the machine. Whereas with a 3-piece construction, you've got that top piece that's rolled over plus the layers on the inside, and that's just hard to get into a machine and get it to sew correctly. So a lot of times these are hand sewn. And there's some big advantages to having a hand sewn stitch over machine sewn. Because of a sewing machine, the way it works is that top thread gets pushed through the material, and then underneath the material in that bobbin, it loops the 2 top thread and the bottom thread together, and then they pull them tight. And so on the inside of a stitch, you've got those 2, the top thread and the bottom thread, looped together, and they're dependent on each other for tension. So the way that this 1-piece mock toe is sewn together is all those layers, all these little stitches are looped. So if you pop one of those stitches, the whole thing comes unraveled, just like you've done, like if you ever popped a seam on your shirt or wherever on your clothes, it just comes unraveled. Versus a hand sewn, this is the traditional way of hand sewing saddles. They call it saddle stitching. We use it in our wallets because it's the more traditional way to do it. But the way that they sew this is they take a single piece of thread instead of 2 pieces, and they put a needle on either end and attach the needles to the thread. And then instead of looping them, they basically weave in and out of the leather. And so for each hole, a needle on the top side and the back side, it passes through. And so you're just weaving the thread in and out. And the advantage of this is if you pop one of these stitches, because they're not looped and dependent on each other for tension, if you pop one of those stitches, the whole thing doesn't come unraveled. You could still run a boot with a pop stitch that was hand sewn for a few days until you get it to the cobbler and have them fix it, because that stitch is tied in at the very beginning and the very end. So it'll be looser, but it's not going to completely come unraveled like a machine sewn. So overall, you got the 1-piece that is a single piece upper that has basically a decorative stitch around the mock toe. You've got the 2-piece, which is the most common, where you see in boots that have a wider toe box that allows you to build it up a little bit more, give you more room, but it has some flaws because it's 2 pieces buttered together and sewn. And then you've got the traditional way of doing it with the 3-piece, where you've got kind of the best of both worlds, and it also is more common on a traditional moccasin construction like we saw and explained at the very beginning. How would you rank these when it comes to the durability? It's a tough one to do because each brand, you've got a single piece toe on the Carolinas, you got a single piece toe on the Brunts, and you also have a single piece toe on the Nicks. So anywhere from $150 up to $650, you can have a single piece toe. So it's really dependent on the brand, the model, the leather. There's a lot of factors besides the construction that matter. But if you're just looking at construction, I would say for durability's sake, if I were to rank it, the best would be the 3-piece because the hand sewn, the extra material. Next would be the 1-piece because you don't have if you do blow out this seam completely, you're gonna have some extra stitches or extra holes in your leather, but it's not gonna fall apart. Versus a 2-piece, if you do pop that stitch, it can flap up and you're in a little bit of trouble. But that being said, one of the beautiful things about mock toes is if you do pop a stitch, you just take a needle and thread and you can re-sew your own mock toe back together. So now let's talk about what to look for when you're buying a mock toe boot, because we get lots of questions about mock toes. What type of mock toe should I get? Which one is the best? So if you're looking for like a very traditional mock toe that's really flat, that has a really low profile, that feels really natural underfoot, you're not having this tons of cork and leather and nails and all this stuff on the inside, the traditional mock toe is the way to go. But you're not going to get quite as much arch support, you're not going to get nearly as much foam underneath your foot, and it's a very different feel. It's more of like a sneaker feel than a boot feel. And so a lot of people aren't going to use these for construction. They're mostly used for game hunting and bird hunting and like light hiking around, flat hiking, because they're just not rugged enough for really like high altitude hunting in rocks and stuff like that. If you're looking for a work boot, some of these Carolinas and Thorogoods and these guys that make these this traditional this work Moc Toe, this might be the way to go, because you've got an affordable price range, because it is that simple one-piece construction that, even though it's just decorative, a lot of people really love these for work. You can get them for a pretty affordable price. They have decent leather. They've got a decent outsole that's going to last for working. And really, when it comes down to it, a $200 boot is going to last about as long as a $500 boot when you're out on the work site, until you need a resole. You know, and that's really where those high-end boots come into play. Is like when it's time to resole them. A lot of times you get 0 resoles out of a really work-worn thorogood and Carolina, versus like these Nicks and Whites and some of these other guys. Once your sole's done, you can send them back in and have them resoled, and you get a little extended life out of your boot. But a lot of construction workers don't have the money for a $650 boot, so a lot of times when people are asking for which style of Moc Toe should I get for work, I usually recommend these. Then for the heritage boys, the boys that, you know, you're not necessarily working in your boots, but you like that heritage style. Not everyone that wears boots has to work in them. You know, that's something that drives me nuts a little bit in the comment section, is people get in there, they're like, these hipsters with their heritage boots, they never seen a day of work in their whole life. They've never even seen a shovel. Not everyone has the same lifestyle as these guys, or not everyone wears boots for fashion, not everyone wears them for work. So if you are wearing them for style and you want that rugged look and you want that heritage style, a lot of times these two-piece Moc Toes are what gives you that taller profile, but not quite the moccasin look, but that heritage look, while still having the traditionally made toe. And it's, you know, you can just tell a difference. You know, this looks more like a heritage boot, and this looks more like a worker's boot. So a lot of times if someone's looking for a heritage style boot, I direct them towards the Red Wings and some of these other guys that make two-piece Moc Toe. So then the final question is, do you need a Moc Toe? It's one of these things where I would say like 95% of the Moc Toes on the market are strictly decorative. So do you need a Moc Toe? Not usually, unless you want the look. The only couple times where it's different is if you can find a Moc Toe that allows for a taller toe box and a wider toe box, or if you're looking for a true moccasin construction with the leather wrapped underneath and the hand sewn details. So Moc Toes kind of are this thing where they're a little bit overhyped in the boot market, and not even overhyped, but they kind of have been misconstrued for what their purpose is. Most people, I would say like the average person would say, what's this Moc Toe boot for? Like, oh, it's a work boot because it's a Moc Toe. But a lot of times they don't have any actual benefits over their plain toe counterparts other than the look of the Moc Toe. So you don't need a Moc Toe. They're mostly for style. Or if you want like a true moccasin to be sneaking around in the lowlands, you're just kind of sneaking up on animals in the grass or fowl hunting or whatever you're doing. But for the most part, moccasins are just for style, Moc Toes. And so hopefully that was all the information that I know about Moc Toes. And if you have something that I missed, if there's something I didn't cover in this video, just put it in the comments, because that's the beautiful thing about this channel, and thanks to you guys, is our comment sections, it's pretty cordial. People aren't really rude to each other, and like occasionally it gets a little disagreement in the comment section, but it's just a really good resource for knowledge for people that have actually been wearing these, that have seen all these different models and how they wear. And it also keeps me in check, because occasionally I forget a very important thing. So if I forgot something, be sure to put it in the comments. And thank you guys for supporting this channel too. I want to do some more videos like this, kind of go over like, maybe the next one would be like different styles of construction, Goodyear welt versus stitch down versus Blake stitch, you know, all these different styles. But that's only if this does well. So if you guys like it, support it. And thanks again to Devia for sponsoring this video. Check out their boots below. Nice little Moc Toes. This is actually, I already spoiled it. You tell me, what kind of Moc Toe is this? You're right, it's a two-piece. It's almost like I just spoiled it. But yeah, check these guys out below, and thanks again to them for taking a gamble on the channel too, and being willing to sponsor one of these, because this is what allows us to spend the time researching this and really giving you the accurate and pertinent information that you need to really be able to judge your boots and your footwear, and slowly build up your knowledge base, so that when you go out in the wild and you're like, I need to go boot hunting or boot shopping, what boot should I get? You don't have to refer to every single video. You should be able to take this information and apply it in the real world, thrift shopping, brand new boot shopping. When your dad needs a pair of boots, it's important, because like they say, invest in the what is it? I already forgot. Invest in the 2 things that keep you from the ground, your bed and your boots, I believe is what it is. So thank you guys for all your support, and Moctober, I can't believe I made this whole video without talking about Moctober. Moctober begins. This is going to be the most interesting Moctober we've done. We got tons of good brands. We got lots of interesting things going with the, not Mikasa, the made in the United States, the Metusa series. So lots of good stuff to come. I appreciate all you guys' support. I love doing this. So thank you. See ya.